Welcome back to Damn Parenting Podcast. I'm your host Eva, and today I'm incredibly excited to welcome Dr. Elke De Witte, a leading neurolinguist, cognitive rehabilitation expert, and now author of the much talked about new book, The Moederbreinmythe, Myth, The Motherbrain Myth. Now, this book is currently only available in Dutch, but as soon as I heard about it, I knew I couldn't wait for the translation to come out, and honestly, I don't think any of us should. The ideas and research in this book are just too important to sit on. And as someone who's always hungry for research, facts, and real insight into what's happening in the parenting brains, I had to get Dr. De Witte on to talk about it. And I'm going to be honest, I've been sneaking around LinkedIn posts, dabbing in Google Translate and piecing together bits and bobs just to get a sneak peek into the Motherbrain myth. And honestly, nothing beats having the expert herself here to break it all down and answer the questions we're all dying to ask. The Motherbrain myth is already making waves across Belgium and the Netherlands, showing up in national media and parenting platforms, and for a good reason. In it, Dr. De Witte challenges some of the biggest assumptions about motherhood and the female brain. She breaks down the science behind maternal mental load, identity shifts, and the myths that shape how society views and often limits mothers. And here at Damn Parenting, that matters deeply. We're all about supporting parents, especially mothers, because let's be real, we are still incredibly understudied, undersupported, and overwhelmed while trying to raise children in systems that were never really built with us in mind. Dr. De Witte brings not only her scientific depth, but also so much clarity and compassion into this conversation. And we're so honored to have her with us today to dive into the brain science, bust some myths, and explore how we can better support ourselves and each other as modern parents. So, Dr. De Witte, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Welcome. I'm happy to be here as well.
Your book, The Motherbrain Myth, is already opening up so much needed conversation. So to start with, what was the moment or maybe the feeling that made you realize this book needs to be written?
Well, it was actually my own experience, as you already said a bit in the introduction, because I was so overwhelmed as a mother as well. And I'm, well, actually just a passionate person that loves very different things, but also loves the brain. And I've been studying the brain for a while. Because I did a PhD in neurolinguistics, and I was working on language monitoring in patients that are undergoing awake brain surgery for brain tumors. So something very specific, but I also studied really the plasticity of the brain in patients during my postdoc. And actually, when becoming a mother of two young boys, they're 4 and 6 right now, I just discovered some changes in myself. I was like having a couple of challenges, let's say, and not only physical challenges, but also some mental challenges. And I always loved challenges, and I was always pushing boundaries, moving forward, also living abroad for a couple of years in the States for my postdoc and for a health tech company. So it's really someone, that really loved to work and that was kind of going fast. And my brain was always letting me do that. But then after becoming a mother of two sons, it suddenly felt like my brain was moving backward and slowing down. And I became very curious about the maternal brain. So I started researching and eventually wrote the book, The Motherbrain Myth. But the funny thing was that actually for me as a neuroscientist, I was really like in shock that I knew not a lot about the maternal brain because the brain of a patient is not only plastic, but also the maternal brain is very plastic during matrescence. And actually, I never learned about it during my studies, even not during my postdoc neuroscience studies that I took in the States. So I was really surprised about that. And I was like, if I don't know about that, then what with all the other people that don't have like an interest specifically in the brain? And that's why I really found that it was important to write a book like this that was very open and easy to read for a large audience because, of course, I delved into all these research papers because I'm used to do that, and there's a lot of nuance in this, and what you usually read in press is kind of like a black and white view, which makes it sometimes difficult to know what we need to believe and what is right. So what I really wanted to do with this book was really to have a comprehensive overview of what is really happening in the maternal brain, what is the impact on our cognitive and emotional functions, but also what are women, what are mothers experiencing, and how can we deal with the challenges that we face because of certain social-cultural factors. So I really wanted to bundle all of that. So using my neuroscientific expertise, but also my experience as a mother and interviewing other mothers, I wanted to have that information available for a wider audience, not just myself.
In your book, you highlight how vital connection and support are for mothers' brains. So, for immigrants living far from home, family, and friends, often in a completely new country like us here in the Netherlands, and without a strong support network, how does the distance impact their brain and well being? And what can we do to feel more supported even when we're feeling far from home?
Yeah, that's actually something I experienced myself as well when I was living abroad. Yeah, it's really sometimes a lonely period, although you have so many stimuli, so many new things going on. At some point, you are missing some like deep connections with friends, and it sometimes takes a while to build these connections abroad. But I think that's why international communities are creating online international communities like yours are super valuable because it gives us a sense of belonging and it creates a place for people to talk about their challenges. And yeah, as I already said, the maternal brain is very plastic during matrescence, during this transition period from woman to motherhood. And it's as plastic as the adolescent brain. And of course, plasticity is very good because it means our brain is flexible, is able to adapt. But it also has another factor, which is during this period of plasticity, the brain is also very vulnerable to a high level of stress, and this stress can be linked to stress that was associated with maybe some birth issues or parenting issues, but also that is very associated with the social environment we live in, meaning do we feel safe, do we have financial stability, do we have support, or do we have to do it all alone. So I think these social factors are very important because they can contribute to a high level of stress. And we know that social support is just a very good buffer for psychological conditions such as postnatal depression. So I think it is really important. I think social support is really one of the most important things that we need to make sure that we have, and especially for parents living with their kids abroad, because when I was living in the States, it was still, let's say, the two of us and there were no kids. So I can only imagine the challenges you have. So I think, creating communities, but also social support systems for people living abroad is super important.
So, building on that, many international mothers specifically face a double challenge. So, they're adjusting to a new environment while navigating all the brain and identity changes that come with becoming a mother, I guess. So, from your research, are there any kind of strategies or support really that make a difference in those layered situations?
So yes, I think the small environment around the mother is very important, because what we do see is that the mental load that mothers have is also an important contributor to certain mental challenges that they face. And I think what can already do is really be conscious about the division of care. Let's say if you're with your partner abroad, it's really important to think about all the new tasks that are there because of parenting, and not only think about the physical tasks, like who's doing the household, who's taking care of the kids, but also really what is behind this task, what is the mental or the cognitive load that you have, what are all the things that you have to think of in your head, that you have to organize, what are all the worries you have. Because what we see from research is that there is a very skewed division when you look at who is taking most of the mental load. So I think it's important to talk about this with your partner, because high mental load is really linked to poor mental well-being. So I think when thinking about prepping for parenthood, we should not only think about really the physical tasks, but really like who is thinking about all these little tasks, like what kids need to take to school, or planning birthday parties or whatever, that we really take into account this mental load, because this cognitive load is really a very important factor linked to the forgetfulness that we often see in moms, and that we often link to the changes in the brain. But we should not. We should actually start externalizing these challenges instead of always looking into the brain. But we will probably dive into that later, like what is really changing in the brain and what is the impact.
So you just jokingly there mentioned the whole mom brain and how
Yeah.
that usually gets used jokingly or dismissively. In your book, you really reframed it though into a more positive light, I think. So what were some surprising or beneficial ways our brains actually change when we become mothers?
Yeah, so it is exactly always this memory is always reduced to this forgetfulness, but in reality, the brain undergoes profound changes that are actually positive and that are really adaptive and that help support caregiving and bonding. So it's not a degradation, but it's actually a specialization, and it's really important we do not overlook motherhood as like positive changes to our cognitive abilities. Because if we look at the literature, we actually cannot find like big evidence for these memory disabilities. Okay, there are some sort of little changes at the end of the pregnancy and immediately postpartum, because of course, when we learn a lot of new skills, the cognitive load is high. So what happens? Our brain changes and is adaptive and is really like focusing on the essential parts, really focusing on how to read the social cues and the emotional cues of your baby. And at that time, your cognitive load is so high that it's going to filter out less important memories, such as where did I put my keys? But actually, what we see is if we hold on these cognitive challenges, we actually create cognitive reserve. And it's actually a positive story where you see that the brain of a mother and of parents is actually more flexible, more resilient, more responsive, more efficient, and especially for social cognition, for functions that are important to read social cues, to adapt, to react to those social cues in a very efficient and fast way. So what we see, if you look at the literature, is actually a totally different story. We see all these cognitive strengths that we get as a mother. To give you a couple of examples, there are a lot of positive things that have been found with regard to the executive functions, which are like improved planning, greater flexibility, more focused work. But as I already was saying, faster and more accurate responses to baby signals, an improved nonverbal communication with the baby, but also an enhancement of perceptions. Mothers are better at recognizing the emotions of the faces of the baby, but also an improved tactile recognition. And even positive things have been found for memory. We see improved memory for parenting related information and objects. So right after the birth, you see that parents are very good at memorizing things like the amount of powder or milk you need. But also at a later age, at 50 or 70, we find that mothers are better than non-mothers in visual memory and verbal memory. And then there are a lot of other tasks that are a bit more subtle, which we learn as parents, which are, for example, more creative problem solving. If you think of all these situations that you have as a parent, where you also have to make very fast decisions under pressure because your kid is running away and the other one is running the other direction. So there are a lot of things that we learn as parents that are actually undervalued also at the work floor. So I think, well, that's really my mission, to rewrite the narrative of this mom brain and to stop always linking it to these changes in the brain, but to start thinking about, okay, what is really causing these complaints? Because, okay, mothers experience them, but there's a big difference between what we find objectively and what we see subjectively, and what mothers experience subjectively. And that's where we need to find, okay, what is causing these subjective problems? Because objectively, we actually see a positive story of improved cognitive strengths, but also, yeah, a lot of positive impact on emotional well-being and all these things. So that's really what I want to rewrite. It's a positive story, but to be able to have this positive story, we need to take care of our mothers and to make sure that there's not this high level of continued stress, which is overwhelming our mental load and which is actually causing this brain fog that many mothers experience.
You interviewed over 200 mothers for this book. What were the common feelings or experiences they shared about how their minds and identities shifted after having children?
They do experience some cognitive complaints because As in the literature, I find similar numbers, like 83% of mothers experience cognitive complaints after pregnancy and 78% during pregnancy. But we don't find any, let's say, proof of these complaints. We need to dive deeper. And for example, there was this study that looked at participants that completed memory tests both in the lab and at home, and the results showed that pregnant women performed just as well in the lab but worse at home, which suggests that the additional mental load in daily life impacts memory performance of mothers. So there is proof that this mental load is an important factor in these, well, let's say, brain fog, because I don't want to call it mom brain anymore. That's what I want to say, and that's what I say in my book as well. Let's stop using the word mom brain to refer to these complaints, but let's just use brain fog if you experience this, so we can look at what is happening. And if I looked at the numbers in my survey, I also saw that 99% of my mothers said that they experienced this mental load, and actually 86% of them experienced quite a lot to very high levels of mental load. So you see it everywhere. And then the question is, how come is the mental load so high these days? And I think there are a number of factors there. There are a lot of high number of mothers that are doing it alone. This mental load is really rising also because of the mother intensive ideologies, these high standards that we create for mothers. We have to do it all. We have to be perfect doing it all. But also, some social cultural factors that are coming from, how we see mothers, how we value motherhood, how we talk about motherhood, how we don't see it as an important transition, how it's like, oh, it's something you can do easily. Because I also write it in my book. There was this quote, obstetrician handbook in 1848, where they said, she woman has a head too small for intellect, but just big enough for love, and probably just big enough for mother love. So there's this whole patriarchal idea around motherhood and around, well, it's not so hard to do. And of course, the narrative has changed, of course, for the good. But there's still this under-evaluation of motherhood. So it's like, oh, it's something that is easy. Mothers can just do it. They don't need help. They don't need support. They're just doing it anyway. And then you have this high idealistic view of how well mothers need to do it. Whereas it should be about good parenting, good enough parenting, and not perfect parenting. So I think all these things play a big role. And it's also interesting to see that, the individualistic culture we have in definitely in our Western countries, such as the Netherlands and Belgium, is also playing a key role, because there was this study as well that looked at parental burnout numbers in like many, many different countries. And they looked at different factors that could play a role, such as, individualistic culture, but also how many kids they had, how many time they spent with their kids, what the socioeconomic status was of the country. And actually, the surprising thing was that the factor individualistic country was the most contributing one to the number of, to the percentage of burnout. So not really how much time you spent with the kids, or how many kids there were, or socioeconomic status. It was really like individualistic culture. So the more individualistic the culture was, the higher the percentage of parental burnout. So I think, that's really an important factor that I actually, again, saw in all these responses of these mothers. But there were many things that I saw. There were also these emotional challenges that they faced, where, for example, the numbers of loneliness and guilt really raised during pregnancy leave. And then when mothers were returning back to work, percentages of high level of stress doubled when they returned to work. So all these things really show that there's something kind of missing. And actually, of course, it's contributing to this brain fog that mothers experience, because they're so overwhelmed. And if you have to do it alone, if you don't have a lot of support, if you have a lot of social cultural expectations, then it's just too much for your brain. And then, of course, this brain fog is starting to come. Because if I looked at how long they experienced this brain fog, 34% mentioned that they even had them until 3 years after surgery. So it's really crazy. On the other hand, what was interesting, though, is that, of course, because of all these memes that we have in our social media, in press, such as, I used to have functioning brain cells, but I traded them for kids. It's also sort of and they call it the attribution bias. People are kind of also focused on this, yeah, mother brain that is failing. So everyone is really paying attention to these negative things. And it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you focus on these things, of course, you will notice these things, but maybe you already had them a bit before. But the thing is, if we start focusing on the strengths, because I also asked the mothers, like, can you think about the strengths that you have? And then many mothers were writing, well, actually, now that you ask about it, there are things that I do way better, just like prioritizing really focused work and really creative problem solving. So when you ask about them and they think about it a bit longer, they will find things. It's just also this narrative, of course. It's not the only factor, but you could see that in my interview as well, that because of this history and this narrative that has been so negative, sometimes people forget to think about the good things as well. So I think that's also important to really start thinking differently. Okay, we have some issues, but think of all the strengths and all the good things that your mom brain brought.
You brought up there quite a few points there that I have questions for as well. So
Yeah.
one of them being the terminology. You spoke about the terminology of mother brain and that how you don't want that to be used. Question I did actually have is whether there really is a thing as maternal instinct or if that's more of a myth. And what does neuroscience say about intuition and the brain's adaptation to motherhood?
Yeah, so I would say maternal instinct is a myth if you define it as something genetic that makes sure that when you're a mom, you know immediately what to do. This is really proven wrong by science because also the changes in the brain, how they work, it's of course they start, you have these structural changes that start during pregnancy, but to take care of a baby, you need interaction with the baby. You need to learn things. You need to create new connections in your brain. And it's really this dynamic long-term process where interactions with your baby is needed. And that's why we see these changes as well in fathers and in non-biological mothers. So this maternal instinct, it's not true. Of course, because of the time you spend with your kids, you will learn how to react, how to adapt. And that's often something that is mistaken for maternal instinct because of course if you as a mother spend most of the time with your kids very close and your partner is not that present, then of course it's easy to say, well, it's the maternal instinct. No, it's just because you spend a lot of quality time with your baby that you learn and that you know how to react, that you can read the signals of the baby so that you know what to do, and that you know that this cry means hungry, this cry means I have some stomach issues. So that's really what is happening actually. It's a process that starts during pregnancy, but that continues after pregnancy because of the interaction with the baby. Similarly, with fathers, we see changes in the brain, structural changes as well, functional changes, and they actually already start during pregnancy of the partner. And we see if the partner is very connected to the baby and is talking a lot about it, we already see these changes happening as well. But then after the birth, of course, when the father is spending a lot of time, we see these changes as well. So yes, maternal instinct is a myth. Of course, there is something like maternal behavior, which you could call maternal intuition, because of course you spend a lot of time with the baby. And as I'm saying, as a mother, you've been bonding a lot. The baby has been in your belly if you're a biological mother. So of course, as a mother, you know what is happening with your kid. But to call it like maternal instinct, as if you're a mother, you know directly what to do. No, of course, some situations will be a good basis to learn fast and quick. And some situations, for example, when there's a lot of stress and there's, for example, a traumatic birth, will make it harder to have this good basis and it will go slower, this learning process. But the maternal instinct, really something like, you know, immediately what to do. This is a myth.
You mentioned earlier about maternity leave and women in work environments. There's a lot of talk about becoming a mother impacts our professional lives, and research shows that many women experience a significant drop in income and career momentum after having children. So, from your perspective, how does motherhood shape identity and ambition? And what do you think needs to shift socially or structurally so that mothers can thrive both at home and at work?
That's an interesting question because I'm thinking about it a lot as well from my experience. because I'm very ambitious, but at some points I was like, really, this is not something I can combine. But then reading about it, also looking at other cultures such as Sweden and Norway, I see there are possibilities. And I wrote this interesting article, which was in Dutch. I'll say it in Dutch, and then you can help me translate. Botst het moederbrein tegen het glazen plafond? Like, is the mother brain going against this glass ceiling which we have? And then a lot of experts reacted to that, saying, no, it's really sociocultural patterns that are like getting in the way. Meaning there's no proof that the mother brain is not good enough to face these challenges when being ambitious and wanting to make a career. But it's actually because mothers need to fully adapt to the work culture and not the other way around, that we have these issues. And that what I already said, that certain parental qualities such as higher social cognition, better emotional intelligence are not really valued, that we have all these issues because there is no proof that the mother brain is not functioning well. But it's just the sociocultural structure that is just not helping, because we always see mothers as you have to work as you're not a mother, and you have to mother as you're not like working. So it's really this issue of not being supportive of moms. And I think there's a lot that can be done in the work culture to make sure it is possible. Because if you look at Sweden, where you have, for example, all these systems in place, such as you have this long parental leave that is also shared and obliged, so that it makes sure that the partner, being a mom or a dad, is also involved there the first 3 months. So it's more shared, the work, and there's more support. And then there's these additional months that you can share with even grandparents or other people. So it gives you this good basis, good start to really be more relaxed and be, let's say, have this brain rest, which you need in the beginning, to then start and to then start fully with good intentions. Because I have the feeling here, people feel guilty because they have this so many months leave, and then they feel as if they need to return this back. And they also get all these comments about this. So it doesn't help, because you feel like, oh, I'm already behind and now I have to catch up with these months, because our work culture doesn't like accept this really. It's like, oh, they have this maternity leave, and then we do as if nothing happened. We want them back, but you're still after 3 months in this period of like sleep deprivation, a lot of things that can happen, sick kids. So this flexibility is really something we need as parents. And I think there are some good examples of companies that do have this parental friendly policy so that people can thrive. And I'm not saying everyone should do this, but it's more like, if I would have the choice and there's a good structure, I think I would maybe still work as an employee and maybe not as a freelance or an independent. I sometimes have the feeling mothers are like really pushed away from like employee life, because it's just not flexible and it's just not created for parents. And that was also the comment I got from like many parents and many mothers in my interview. It's like, yeah, the society is just not built for parents. We don't have this structure. We don't have this village support. We have all these issues with just good quality daycare in Belgium and in the Netherlands as well. But I think in Belgium it's even worse. So there are all these different things that really don't help, and that sometimes make it impossible for women to choose. And then they're saying like, oh, but now you don't have to complain because we fought hard for emancipation, so don't complain. So it's really like I think it's a difficult story, and I think it really starts with creating this work culture so that parents can thrive in this culture. And I'm sure if we would have a better culture, that there would be more choice. I think that's really the issue that I see with many women, mothers, parents, that they feel like they don't have a choice, and they either like work crazy hard and go into parental burnout, or they just decide themselves like, I'm not going to go into this rat race, and I decide to step out of like the career ladder or whatever. But is it really a choice? I sometimes feel like it's not a choice, but like it's just implicitly biased by all these things. Like I don't have good quality of daycare. I don't have the support. I don't have this. I don't have this. So I'm not going for this promotion. But actually, if you would have this structure that helps you, maybe you would want to go for promotion. So I think that's really the thing. Do we really have the choice, or is it like an implicit bias because of we're not really well surrounded to make this as a conscious choice? What do I want with my career?
I have to definitely say that that's something that I feel like I do see that here in Amsterdam specifically, because I notice that there's a lot of moms who tend to back away from their company and set up their
Mhm.
own. So they become a freelancer, and
Exactly.
usually in the realm of helping support other mothers, because
Yeah.
usually they needed some help
Yeah.
and now they want to give that back to the community. So I have noticed that why are we having to stop? And it's usually because, as you say, it's an environment in work that they're not feeling welcome to go back. And equally, it's a case of we didn't have the support. So you're on a
Yeah.
one scale of I don't have support, and one scale I'm not even supported in work either. Let me give back and care for the mothers and be part of the village or be part of the community to feed back into that.
Yeah, so it does have a very positive side. I do agree that I think it's really nice to see that a lot of women, mothers, parents are really going for these initiatives. Like we now have these revillaging initiatives where I'm part of. So there's a lot happening. So it has a good side as well. But sometimes I feel like, yeah, is it really a choice? And I think that's sad that some people don't really have the choice. And I think it could be a choice, but it is, yeah, it is leading to some very nice initiatives, which recently I also met someone who is now creating this daycare solution during holidays at the company's site. So, I mean, I think if we indeed think creative, there are a lot of things possible, and we shouldn't always look at like very old structures, but look at very creative ways. And that's nice to see how the pain sometimes provides something bigger. And I think with my experience, it's a bit similar. It's like you face a lot of challenges, and then you start researching, you start reading, and you're like, why can I not share this with a bigger community so they learn from it as well? So I think that's really nice that you see that, yeah, our mother brain, our parental brain is very flexible and resilient and can handle a lot of things. Yeah, create nice new environments.
Your book also highlights that these brain changes aren't just for biological mothers, they also happen in fathers, adoptive parents, and caregivers. Can you walk us through what's happening in the brain for all these parents and how it plays out day to day?
Yes, so there's a lot happening. I already mentioned structural changes, functional changes. So there's one thing for sure, the brain changes, and we can really see it in the structure of the brain even until 6 years after surgery. And the neuroscientist, the researcher that is really focusing a lot in the Netherlands on the maternal brain is Elseline Hoeksema. And she's even saying that now they'll have these brain scans of mothers that they saw 15 years ago until now. So maybe within a couple of months or a year, we will have this study where we can even see structural changes until 15 years after surgery. That's because of my specific
Can I
research
just
topic.
check? When you say
Yeah.
surgery, do you mean birth?
No, yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. It's just my specific research interest. I mean, birds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what is not changing actually? There was a recent study where they followed one woman with 26 very precise brain scans before pregnancies because she has an IVF baby. I don't know if it's the same in English. Yeah. Until 2 years after. And they saw there were so many parts in the brain that were changing. So, what are the most common things we see structurally? So, what we see is during pregnancy and after childbirth, certain brain areas, which we call gray matter, that are important for responding to a baby's needs are shrinking. And that also didn't help because some people immediately link this to this brain fog and this forgetfulness. Oh, our brain is shrinking, so it means our brain is getting dumber. But actually, if you look at the brain regions that are shrinking, they are linked to the theory of mind, which is the ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and perspectives. So it's basically putting yourself in someone else's shoes mentally. So it's basically showing that when the brain shrinks, it's specializing, it's fine tuning, and it's making sure that you're able to respond to a baby's needs. So that's one thing we see. But at the same time, what we see is there's an increase in the volume of white matter tracts. And the white matter tracts are the connections that connect different brain regions. And what we observe during pregnancy, there's an improved communication between those regions and those regions that are responsible for visual and emotional processing. So they work better together. So we're not only seeing shrinkage, but we're also seeing an improvement in these connections between the regions. And then what we see postpartum is that these gray matter areas that shrinked are now increasing again. And this is linked to then learning new skills, which you need for parenting. And as said, these structural changes can be observed to many years after childbirth. And there are even researchers suggesting that there might be lifelong changes. So that's one part, the structural changes. And then we have functional changes. Functional changes are changes in the brain function or activity. And how do you measure that? Well, when you have a mother or a parent, they go under a scanner, an MRI scanner, but you have this functional MRI scanner which detects activity in the brain while you're doing certain tasks. For example, you're looking at crying babies or happy babies, and then they look at what is happening in your brain, which regions become very active. And what they find in general is that the mother's brain is very active. So we see increased brain activity in regions that are important for emotional processing in brain networks, because the brain actually works in a network, not only brain regions, but these connections combined with the brain regions. There's certain brain networks, such as the motivation and reward network. They become more active when they respond to infant cues. So that's what we're seeing. Mothers are more active responding to babies, and we see these functional changes and structural changes not only in mothers, but also in fathers and non-biological mothers. And as I already was saying a bit, even during pregnancy of the partner, when the father is very connected to the baby and attached, we see these changes as well. And then with interaction with the child, we see it as well. What is the difference? Well, of course, the biological mothers have sort of a 9-month, very deep connection with the baby. So these changes we see in parents or in fathers are a bit more subtle and are really depending on the time and the interaction they have with the baby. So the more they interact with the baby, the bigger the changes. So there are many studies actually that look at, for example, mother and fathers, but also homosexual relationships between two fathers. And what they see, if these fathers are actually the primary carer, then we see similar changes between the mother, who is a primary carer, and, for example, a homosexual couple where the father is the primary carer. And it doesn't really depend if the father is then the biological one or not. They see these changes in both of them because they're equally very involved in parenting. So that's where we see that the interaction is really something that is necessary for parenting and also to induce these changes in the brain. So that's why we actually talk about the parental caregiving network in science. We don't really talk about the mother brain or the father brain. There is really this network of brain regions that are universal for parents and that are, of course, influenced by the interaction you have with the kid. The more you interact with the kid, the higher the quality of this time you spend with the kid, the more those regions will change and the more those regions will adapt to parenting, making sure you can learn fast.
Incredible. There's so many questions I want to ask, but I also have to be keeping an eye on the time. With your expertise in neuroscience and language, did you notice any changes in how new parents communicate or think, especially during those early intense months?
Yeah, I think what I already mentioned a bit with the cognitive strengths and the emotional strengths is that parents are really better at certain things like nonverbal communication because they rely more on facial expressions, tone, gesture, touch, which are really crucial for bonding and understanding the needs of their baby. And also, I think they really have this increased emotional expressiveness in their language. There's often more emotional nuance and sensitivity in their communication. Yeah, and these changes in the brain areas that are tied to empathy and social cognition make parents more attuned to emotional cues, which reflects in how they talk. So they really have these good communication skills that go way beyond just communicating, but really the emotional part of communicating as well.
So finally, you argue that supporting parents' mental well-being is a community responsibility, not just a personal one. What are some practical, simple ways that friends, family, or workplaces can step in to help lighten the load for parents?
I think the quote that I really like and I used in my book as well is "Halt a mother, not just a baby." Because that's something we kind of often forget in these societies, is we're always super interested in the mother, and then we go and visit and we ask about the child and we want to take care of the child and we want to carry the child. But I think it's really important to ask about the mother and to ask about how she's doing and how she's really doing and what about her brain. Is she like experiencing forgetfulness? Yeah, how can we support her? So that you really think about the mom first, because it's so important also for the well-being of the child is the well-being of the mother. And then of course I think factors like the division of care, but also how society talks about these things. Like I think it's really good to stimulate people to react to certain myths that are being said. Like if you say, oh, she will know how to breastfeed because her maternal instinct will kick in. It's like, no, it's not working like this. It's like, no, it might be challenging and it depends on many factors. Are there ways to help? Or if a mom goes back to work and they say like, oh, she had these 3 months of holidays, like now she should, work faster. I mean, like, no, don't say that. Like people should react to that. I think that would be nice that people don't just shut down, but if they know, if they have the knowledge, or even if they experience it, I think that can already be a good argument to say, well, my wife experienced it very differently. It's kind of hard. Or things like, oh, it's again her mommy brain. You can say, well, I know the brain, the mother brain is capable of doing a lot of things, but maybe there's a lot in her head going on. There's a lot of mental load. So like, how can we help? So really, I think as a society, as like people, we can just like support the mother, but also react to certain comments to really get rid of those myths that are being there for like so many years. So I think that's an important one. And I think at the workplace, as I already said, I think being aware of the challenges that parents have is the first step, to go and talk with your parents, and really before the baby is coming, not like when the baby is there. Because when a mother is so overwhelmed and going back to work with sleep deprivation, if you then say like, how can I help? I mean, they're already in this state of, I don't know what can help. It's better to really be prepared and really have like a parent-friendly policy before the baby is coming, because you never know how it's gonna be. And I think it's really about having this conversation with your employees, really thinking about, okay, if you go back to work, we have these different options. We thought about it, like some people like to start slowly with one project, or some people like to have some support for colleagues. So you kind of show that there are ways to support the mother and that you really thought about it, and that you can give them examples, because sometimes they're just too overwhelmed to even say what they need. So it's really about like preparing for this and to evaluate and to talk. I think communication is really key. And to not underestimate the skills that we have and learn as parents that are valuable for the work floor. So I think all of these factors can really contribute, and they're way more, of course, but I think these are the ones that I'm thinking of now.
As I recall, in my early days and having spoken to other people, it's not a case of turning around saying, what can we do for you? It's much easier to say, I'm doing this, or we can do this, and just giving them options to then make their own decision with. Because as you say, with brain fog or just being overwhelmed, we can't come up with any suggestions.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's really important. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. De Witte, for joining us today and for sharing your incredible insights into neuroscience of motherhood and parenting more broadly. Wishing you luck on your book tour. I'm sure you're being asked in every single realm there is to discuss what's going on right now. And hopefully we'll be able to get this book in English.
Yeah, well, that might be the next step. So hopefully soon. But also, if you want more information, I'm actually creating an English version of my website now, which is www.elkedewitte.com. So soon there will be more information in English there as well, which will be linked to my social media. So if there are any updates on an English book, you will be able to find it there.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so